The Bears are winning now because of these guys. Who? We'll tell you on Locked On Baylor.
You are Locked On Baylor, your daily podcast on the Baylor Bears. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up there, Bears fans? Welcome to another episode of Locked On Baylor, brought to you by FanDuel. I'm your host, Cam Stewart of ESPN Central Texas and the Cam Show on YouTube. I appreciate you making it your first listen today and every day because we're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team today and every day. We are still coming off that, or kind of basking in that win. I use that word a lot. Basking in that win against Oklahoma State, and we're about to look ahead to the massive matchup against TCU this upcoming Saturday, which has so many fascinating storylines for me personally. But we're still looking back at that Oklahoma State game a little bit because Baylor has certainly turned the corner. We're going to look at the guy or guys that has helped them turn that corner. What we can expect this week for the Big 12 champs coming into town, 2013-14, and the awesome gesture that Dave Aranda reportedly did, and what you might have missed, maybe the best part about Baylor's win over Oklahoma State was who was there in the stands last Saturday. All that and more coming up on this episode of Locked On Baylor. So the Bears are 4-4. It's 2 wins on the bounce. You're feeling real good about the rest of the schedule. Of course, you know, this week poses its own issue. The fact that you've beaten TCU once in the last decade. We'll certainly talk about that this week, but you're feeling good, and you should be feeling good. I know there is still a small subsection of fans that are saying, oh, but who did you beat? Oh, you beat Oklahoma State. They hadn't won a game. And, oh, this coach should still be gone. And you're going to hear that, okay? Of course, I'm living somewhere in the middle in that I don't think Dave Aranda's job is completely safe, but you can enjoy this. Like, there's no tanking in college football. You should be rooting for your team to lose. This is fun. They've won a couple games in a row. They look really good on offense, and they look good enough defensively too. It's been hit or miss, but they've played some real good football the last 2 games. Has it been completely flawless for 4 quarters? Nope, hasn't. But you weren't completely flawless for 4 quarters before that, and you were losing. Now you're winning, and you're making winning plays, and you're rushing for 600 yards in a 2-week span. That's a lot of fun, okay? So now, for most of us out there, instead of trying to, pin it on, who has steered this ship the wrong way, which of course I was trying to do as well. Now it's like, all right, who is to blame for Baylor turning it around and winning it? Who should be getting the credit here? And of course, there's so many places it should go. Obviously, offensively, Sawyer Robertson, they have really rallied behind him. They have had a terrific run game the last couple of weeks with Dawson Pendergrass and Bryce Washington. Matt Jones had a tremendous, outstanding performance on Saturday against Oklahoma State, earning him the Big 12 Defensive Player of the Week. I think Jake Spavital's had a good run. I think Dave Aranda's had a good run the last 2 weeks. But one group that I think we'd be remiss to not give flowers to is the offensive line. Because this was arguably the worst unit on the team coming into the year, offensive line and defensive line. They were the worst unit in the conference last year. They gave up the most sacks comfortably in the Big 12 last year, and it was an absolute mess. It put Baylor so behind the 8 ball offensively. I don't know that they could ever really figure out what they wanted to do behind that offensive line. I think they were out of their depth in terms of that position group. I think they were confused as to what they were getting from quarterback, but this year they liked the quarterback position better, and we still didn't know about the offensive line. They went out and they made it a priority. They went and got guys in the portal, didn't know how quickly they were going to come on and actually play for this team. Most of them came after fall camp, but this offensive line has turned the corner. Okay, again, this team has rushed for 600 yards in the last 2 games. And in the last 3 games, you know how many sacks the Bears have given up? Zilcho. Not a single one. If you had told me that before the season, that, hey, there's going to be a 3-game stretch that Baylor does not give up a sack, I'd say, is it 2030? Because we're so far away from that offensive line being able to do that. I would have been wrong. Most of us would have been wrong. 3 straight games without a sack. I'll take that. I know it's not against the best defensive fronts in the nation, but it didn't look like that was going to matter with this offensive line coming into the year. And one of those games did include Iowa State, which has one of the best defenses in the Big 12. So it's not like they've just been playing a bunch of scrubs. They played two teams that were tied atop the Big 12 standings and one that was picked by some to win the conference the beginning of the year. So that's how you get Iowa State, Texas Tech, Oklahoma State. And again, I'm not really caring about the competition when it comes to this stat. You played 3 Big 12 games and you didn't allow a sack and you rushed for 600 yards. And that great Dawson Pendergrass run to finish off the game, all credit to him, of course, but an assist to Sidney Fugar, I think. The transfer from South Carolina, he's out there like pushing Pendergrass forward out of that huddle that was going on. This offensive line has been terrific these last few games. And Sawyer Robertson's got some escapability, but he hadn't really needed it. He's had time. He's had nothing but time back there. So a tip of the cap, absolutely, to this offensive line unit, which not only was one of the worst in America last year, and certainly the worst in the conference, but you'll remember they got a new offensive line coach in December and then had another new one in January. Okay, talk about getting behind the 8 ball. You bring in a new offensive line coach in January, your second of the offseason, and you go out and get a bunch of guys in the portal. So you're bringing in a bunch of guys who are like, am I even going to play? And or when am I going to play? How do I fit into this? And your offensive linemen who are already in the building are saying, "Oh boy, I was getting starting reps the whole camp. Now is my job in danger?" And the big offensive guard you brought in, Kurt Daniker, has to retire in the summer. It was not looking good for this offensive line. In fact, I looked at it right before the season and said, that could be the death of them. If they don't make a bowl game, that's probably going to be why, because they can't get their offense in rhythm because of this offensive line. That has not been the case. Baylor's winning right now for a lot of reasons, but chief among them is the offensive line and now how they have turned this thing around. And it's made this whole offense look better and their whole offense probably playing better because Sawyer Robertson has time back there to pick apart these defenses. And that's exactly what he's doing. You don't get to 17 touchdowns to just 4 picks on the year because of, shoddy offensive line play. Again, I've talked about this so much, but you look back at that tape in the game against Tech last year, that 39-14 loss, and you'd tell me that the next year they're going to play the same team. You're not only going to beat them by 24, but you're not going to allow a sack. I would have paid any price. And that also gives them sustainability going forward. I talked about this yesterday. Is this offense sustainable? Is it just because they're going against bad defenses? Of course, they've taken advantage of some bad defenses, but it is sustainable. They have balance because of that offensive line out there. You've got running backs who have shown ability and a two-headed monster, and throw in some Richard Reese in there as well. That plus Sawyer Robertson with time, that's all sustainable. And it all starts with the hog mollies up front. So shout out to you, offensive line. And by the way, they've mixed and matched some guys in there. So extra credit to Mason Miller because they have had to move some guys around the last few weeks, and it's still working. And you've had some transfers. You have some guys who were here last year, and they are molded together for an awesome 5-man unit right now. So, yeah, you played some bad fronts the last few weeks, but this unit has absolutely shown you something, and that is a big reason why this offense can be sustainable going forward. I cannot wait to watch it. I can't wait to see those 13-14 Big 12 championship teams back in Waco against TCU in a night game. And I'm glad they're going to get a great seat in the house because of Dave Aranda. What he did for this team, those teams, coming up after this on Locked on Baylor. But first, y'all, you know what time it is. It's Tuesday, which means it's time to recognize the Roy Player of the Week. So far, we've pulled over $20,000 to support players on Roy. Those micro deposits lead to massive change. With the Roy app, you can direct your support to athletes you love, ensuring that all funds go to the specific players you choose. This week, I'm supporting Matt Jones. All right. He won Big 12 Defensive Player of the Week. I don't know. I haven't given it to a defensive guy this year. And I think Dawson Pendergrass is going to have another good game in there as well. So I pitched in $100. I'd love for you to join me. Even $10 makes a difference. Okay. Let's show Matt Jones the love and keep him connected to Baylor. Remember, pay today, celebrate tomorrow. Your support sets your team up for success. Plus, don't want you to miss out on Roy's exciting giveaway. You can win 2 tickets to a game in November. Just download Roy, create an account, enter referral code Locked On, and you're entered. You already on, Roy? Any contribution to an athlete's campaign also gets you entered automatically. No purchase necessary. Download Roy now and join the NIL game with no subscriptions and no fees. And be sure to check us out on Instagram, Facebook, and X at Roy_return on you for more info. Roy, support the players, change the game. It is going to be a nice celebration Saturday night. When this was announced a few months ago, I was real excited about it, that they're honoring the 13 and 14 Big 12 championship teams. This was kind of a point of controversy last year. It was the 10th anniversary of the 2013 Big 12 championship. You remember it. 11-1, beat UT, the final game at Floyd Casey Stadium in the de facto Big 12 championship game. One of the great days in Baylor football history, one of the great teams in Baylor football history. And the school announced that they were not going to do a celebration for them. There were still some pending cases from the scandal that involved a player or two on that team. And so they decided not to do it. Remember, we had Jay Lee on the pod. It was one of the first pods I did. And I was really interested in picking his brain about this, guys who were on that team. And I still find this an interesting question. And I'm sure a lot of this will hopefully be cleared up Saturday night and gone by the wayside. But those guys who played on the teams, do they feel welcome coming back to Baylor? It's a team that is marred by the actions of really a minute portion of that team. And I was saying from day one, there's no reason we can't celebrate those teams. I'm not saying bring out the ones who were, guilty of doing these awful things. Of course not. But that's less than a handful of players on those two teams. And these are two of the best teams in Baylor football history, one of the great runs in Baylor football history. You can still celebrate that. And I'm glad that Baylor is doing it this year on the 10th anniversary of the 2014 teams. They're bringing them both back. Most of those guys are going to run the line. And Sikkim 365 had the report yesterday morning that Dave Aranda has actually paid for suites for the members of those teams to watch the game at McLean Stadium. And that's really awesome. Credit to Dave Aranda on that. That's a very good, classy move to keep that kind of connection with the teams of the past. I know it's not necessarily his speed to go up and, shake every one of their hands and talk to them. He's not the most social guy, but what he did was made sure they had some of the best seats in the house to watch their alma mater play on a night that somewhat belongs to them. And I think that's really cool. I don't think it's probably something he wanted to get out there, but Baylor Athletics probably did as a very nice token gesture, a token of gratitude from Dave Aranda to those 2013 and 14 teams. It's going to be a fun celebration. I'm sure great highlights and hype videos coming from it. Bryce Petty did also say that he's not going to run the line. He said one trip in the open field was enough for him. So I'm glad he could laugh about it now. That's 2013 against Oklahoma State, for those of you who don't remember. But of course, the question turns to the head coach of that team, 2013-14 teams, Art Briles. And George's, one of my favorite places in town, great restaurant, bar. They announced that they're going to do a little function Friday night before the game. They're going to have a lot of the players back, and they are going to have Art Briles there. And of course, that sparks up so much from Baylor fans who are wondering why he's not being invited to the celebration at McLean Stadium. Really? You really can't conceptualize why? And I know there's a lot of people out there that think Art Briles did absolutely nothing wrong. I get that. But really, you can't understand why he's not being invited to this? I've been in the gray area on some of the Briles stuff for a long time, and kind of from the early days of it, of how much does this actually go on the head coach? How much did he know about it? We'll never know. And then he's not, found not criminally negligent or, not negligent and not reporting. And so there's a lot of stuff that's come out the last few years that have been probably in Art Briles' favor. But I think at the end of the day, we're living in the real world, and these things come with consequences. It wasn't all Art Briles' fault. It wasn't all Ian McCaw's fault. It wasn't all Ken Starr's fault, but there's fault everywhere, and they all get fired. Like that. That's how the world works. I'm surprised he hasn't coached again. I've said that several times. I don't think that should be a banishment for life, and it was not. He was not arrested. He was not banned. He was fired from one job. And yeah, I am very surprised he has not worked again in college football. But if you don't understand why Baylor is not going to bring that attention to themselves in that celebration, I don't know how to explain it to you. I don't know how to help you there. And I'm sure there are plenty of Baylor football players from those teams who obviously want him to be there, but I think they can understand, we know why he's not invited to this. And Baylor Athletics put out a statement that said, everyone kind of has their own celebration for this. What are you going to do? Call the cops on Georges for having Art Briles there? No, they wanted to have him there. That's great. And I'm sure all the players want to, connect with him. He was their coach. And so they obviously have a lot of love and respect for him. So I think that's a good thing. Obviously there's going to be plenty of celebrations going on throughout the weekend. There's going to be a good one at Georges, and Art Briles is going to have that, and he's going to be able to connect with all the players. You don't get everything in life. And I think he also understands why he's not been invited to this on-field ceremony. And speaking of, it kind of reminds me of, reminds me of the team they're playing this weekend. TCU has not done a celebration on their 2014 second place finish in the Big 12, which some fans thought they would. They attributed it to Trevon Boykin, who had a checkered past, but after that, he went to prison, and that's kind of why they didn't do it. And they weren't going to invite Gary Patterson. So Gary Patterson, who still lives up there, had a celebration basically in the tailgate area in the parking lot with his former players. And we're talking about one who was fired in scandal and one who was, there for 25 years and elevated that program to heights they had never seen. I guess you could say that latter part about Art Briles too, but no career-ending scandal for Gary Patterson. He didn't even get invited by TCU. So that makes the Baylor decision look, completely sane to everyone. But it's already beginning. Like, guys, we need to relax on this Art Briles thing. Because I know there's plenty of you out there, and I'm sure several that listen to the podcast that are wondering why he's not out there and think he should be invited back. And some probably think he should be the head coach of Baylor right now. It's not going to happen. You've got to let it go. It's not going to happen. That's how it is. Baylor's not going to bring that press to it, whether you think it's negative press or positive press. It's going to be negative press. And whatever you think of the situation, because, I think there is a lot of gray area in it, but he's not coming back. And in the moment, because I remember the moment, as a Baylor student at the time, it was completely understandable that he was fired when you saw the storm that was going on around this program. You guys who are out there thinking that, you've got to give it up. You've got to let it go. We're going to have a cool celebration this weekend with the players from that team who deserve to have that celebration, who deserve to have that, that recognition, those titles to be honored, and those great moments in Baylor history to be remembered. But Art Briles will not be a part of that one. He'll be a part of another one. He'll survive, and so will you. It was a great weekend this past weekend on homecoming, and the Bears got a very, very special visitor. And what that could mean for Baylor Athletics, I think, is something that's really cool, really fun. That's coming up next on Locked On Baylor. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. You know, you're watching the game, you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can't fix it, you can't fight it. You can check out the latest stats. You can view live play-by-play, get all the info you need, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NFL. We had so many visitors to our great campus this past weekend, the oldest and largest homecoming parade in the world happening right here in Waco, Texas. It's always fun. I mean, I get asked what my favorite Baylor tradition is, and it's usually homecoming. I think it's a really fun time, special time, especially, part of the Baylor family. You understand it. It's a great time to see Baylor get connected with Waco, which doesn't always happen or doesn't happen enough. And it's just a really special, fun weekend. And especially when you win a football game against Oklahoma State, and double especially when you have one of the best basketball players in the nation coming to visit that same day. That's right, folks. Koa Pete, the number 6 overall recruit in the 2025 class, according to 247, 5-star across the board, was there on Saturday to see the Bears take on Oklahoma State and all that comes with it. The number 3 power forward in the nation. He is getting offers from all over. Houston, Arizona, Arkansas, Arizona State, who Bobby Hurley said, OS of how far we have to go after losing by like 60 to Duke in a scrimmage as Bobby Hurley returns to Cameron. Anyway, you don't care about that. He also had visits to North Carolina. He had a visit to Duke. He has his choice of anywhere in the nation, wherever he wants to go. And this seems to be the last one that he's taking in this spring, which is huge. It's really huge because, as we've seen with these big-time recruits, once Scott Drew gets you on campus, it's really tough for them to say no. The only one in recent memory that I can remember is Trey Johnson. Big-time recruit that Baylor put a lot into. He said no, he's going to UT, and Baylor got VJ Edgecombe. So I think they made out pretty well. But Koa Pete is a guy who is very much in that same vein as a guy who can very much, lift himself into being a top 5 recruit in the entire nation this year. He's playing out in Arizona, so that's why you see U of A and Arizona State on there most likely. 6'8" wing guy who just everything about him, like AJ DeBonso we talked about before, everything about him screams out top 5 pick in the draft. Like everything. He is just that kind of player, 6'8", 205 already, and he has all the intangibles to get there. Even 2 years ago, as a sophomore, he averaged 20 points a game and 20 and 10 in the prep circuit, like some of the best prep basketball in the entire country. Playing for Team USA, he was dropping 30 burgers in the summer against some international teams. Like, this guy has the tools. All right, super athletic, shows a commitment to defense with some great instincts and really developing the shot. But he makes plays on defense, which I really like. Adam Finkelstein has him as 3 stocks per game, which is steals plus blocks. That right there is as close as you can come in 2024 to like the perfect basketball player, right? The wing guy who could shoot it a little bit, working on that shot, but a real commitment to defense and can score really well from inside the arc, 15 to 18. That's how you get to be one of the top recruits in the nation. So, great day for Baylor to have, obviously the homecoming parade, good enough weather, great win, some real excitement around this football team. And, we kick off basketball next week with a top 10 matchup, Koa. Did you know that? We play a lot of top 10 matchups here at Baylor. And my only hope is that he can get out there for a game at the Foster Pavilion as well, because I know they had Rob Wright out there at one point last year. I believe Jacoby Walter was at one the year before. They got huge ovations does Baylor home games. Obviously, Jacoby's was at the Farrell Center. But come out here, see what we've got, see our facilities, and then see this place when it's really rocking. How can you say no? I've said this about Baylor basketball and Scott Drew and the way they recruit. It's becoming a theme. It's really tough to say no to Baylor basketball if you're one of the top recruits in the country. And this would signify another, feels like, watershed, monumental recruiting get if they're able to get him. But then again, it's not too dissimilar at all to VJ Edgecombe. VJ Edgecombe was looking at Kentucky. He was looking at Duke. He had offers from everywhere. He was a top 5, top 7 player in the country. He chose Baylor too. So there's no reason Koa Pete won't. And the fact that this looks to be the last visit, because his season will get started here, so not a lot more official visits. The fact that this could be his last visit and Baylor's actually gotten him on campus, that usually spells W for Scott Drew. And if it does again, look out everybody else, because they're already bringing in some big-time names in this class. They are rumored with some big-time names again in this class, not just bringing them in, but are around the rim for a lot of these guys. And it just gets me really excited for basketball, man. Really excited for basketball this year and next year and every year that Scott Drew is saying no to the biggest blue bloods in the nation and staying at Baylor and making it a top 10, top 15 job in college basketball, because that's exactly what he's done. And the more VJ Edgecombe's and Koa Pete's that come in here, as well as the more Jeremy Roaches and Norchad Omirs and Ray J. Dennis's and James Akinjo's, the more of those, the better this job is going to become, and the more fun, even more fun, it's going to be a Baylor basketball fan. Can't wait. Very glad they got Koa Pete on campus, because I think that usually seals the deal with Scott Drew. But of course, we'll have to wait on that commitment. What I don't want you to wait for is getting involved in that comment section. Let me know what you think about this Baylor football team turning it around. What's the biggest reason why? How can you say no to Baylor as a 5-star? And for lack of better judgment, tell me what you think about the Art Briles thing in terms of him being invited this weekend. We don't want to rehash the whole thing, okay? We don't need to do that. But I'm interested to hear what you have to say. I'm interested to see how much of the Baylor fan base this is. It'll probably end up annoying me at the end of the day, and I'm not going to probably go back and forth in the comments very much. But I am interested to hear what Baylor Nation feels about that. Because, again, let's just live in reality for a second. That was never going to happen, and it's not going to happen. And I'm sure there's some of you who believe that Art is completely innocent, but also understand that that's not going to happen. And if you do, please drop that in the comments down below. Be sure to like and subscribe. We're getting so close to that subscriber count. Most of you are not subscribed that are listening. Hit that notification bell also to get notified every time we're dropping a video on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. Thank you so much for making it your first listen today and every day. We'll see you tomorrow in your favorite show, Locked On Baylor.